Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast that explores the Great Resignation. I'm your host, Brian Akar. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the reasons they decided to leave their jobs during the pandemic and what has happened since. Hello, and thanks for tuning into this episode of the Why I Left podcast. In today's episode, I chat with Patrecia Ming Buckley. Patrecia is an experienced business development and operations leader living down under in Australia. She has a passion for serving others and has worked diligently to further equality, diversity, and belonging in the spaces in which she's shown up. Now, Patrecia left the consulting industry to reset, refocus, and reconnect to the things that are most important to her. I really enjoyed our conversation and hope you do as well. So let's go check it out. All right, welcome back. So our guest today is Patrecia Ming Buckley. Patrecia is the founder and coach at Women of Color at Work and Salt Light Wellbeing, who joined the Great Resignation to take a career sabbatical. Now, I came across her story in a CNN article and was really curious to learn more about her decision-making process. So hi, Patrecia, how you doing today?
Hi, Brian. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I really appreciate you joining us today. You know, Great Resignation is a hot topic, very trendy topic. And I was, always appreciative to, as you know, kind of stalking these Great Resignation articles. And that's how I came across you. And so before we really talk a little bit about that, how about you tell us some more about your upbringing and where you currently call home?
Sure. So I'm a Caribbean girl. I was born in the beautiful little island of Jamaica, but we were raised in the Northeast United States in Massachusetts. So yeah, I grew up in very different weather and temperature from where we were actually from. And now I currently live in Australia. So I'm based in Sydney, and I've been here for about 4 years now. So yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, there's definitely two ends of the spectrum, Massachusetts and Jamaica. So
yeah.
When you think about your prior career, right? So before you took this career sabbatical, what have you been passionate about in the work that you used to do?
Do you mean the work that I did right before I resigned or prior
Correct.
to? Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, look, I think I was really keen and eager to learn. I was with such a large firm that there were so many different offerings that were available, and I really just wanted to become a really sharp sort of business person, even though I think, which we'll talk about a bit later, but, even though I sort of knew deep down inside that wasn't really me per se, I think that idea to me sort of, I thought would mean success. And so, I was passionate about learning. I was passionate about working with some of the smartest people in the industries that I worked with and just really growing more as a professional, as an intellectual. So I think those were the things that really drew me to a career at a Big Four. Yeah.
Yeah. And now prior to that career sabbatical, tell us a little bit about your work journey and what has worked well in the environments that you've been a part of?
Well, my work journey is quite a zigzag. I come from a legal background. I went to law school. I took a year off after my first degree, which I got in government and French. And then I decided that I wanted to go to law school. I think it was something that was sort of a long time coming for me. So I went to law school down in South Florida, and then I finished up law school. And then I said, look, I don't know that I want to litigate in terms of being in court every day. And, I kind of did a bit of a fellowship with the Florida prosecution, the Attorney General's office. And, it was just very depressing. I didn't like seeing people go to jail. I just didn't, just something about it that wasn't quite in alignment with what I wanted to do every day. So I decided I was going to go into public sector. So I got a job with the Senate there. And I was working for a senator in District 12, which is this sort of central Orlando-based district. And yeah, I learned heaps there, really grew sort of in policy and community work and, legislation. So that's where I really sort of got those chops within the Senate, and probably where I really learned how to kind of stand independently in terms of my career and kind of trying to guide the ship in different ways where I thought I wanted to go. And yeah, and then sort of, I realized that there was a lot of bureaucracy, and I think I got a bit jaded when I thought about how much more could have been done. But, I think as with a lot of government roles, you realize that there are intentions and then there's practicality, especially when it comes to executing things, right? With the bureaucracy and the red tape. And I think I sort of grew a little bit weary of that. And, sort of life took my family into Atlanta, into Georgia. So we ended up moving. And I said, look, I want to try private sector. I got a role with let's just say a large organization in Atlanta. And I was writing their policy and procedures for them. And that was really cool because I never really got to do anything within a private company before. I was coming out of, a legal background. I did a lot of legal research. I did a lot of lobbying, and I did a lot of things, for example, at the UN. And so I was really, really into human rights and public sector. So moving into a private company was quite different for me. And so, so I started to really learn more about what corporate life looked like in private sector. I enjoyed the efficiency of corporate life, but not so much the work-life balance. So that's sort of right. That was the trade-off for me. And also, I was finding myself to be not as passionate about sort of the nature of the work that I was doing. And then I got headhunted. So I saw this message on LinkedIn from a recruiter from, one of the big four firms. And they said, look, we've got a role and we think you'd be really great for it. Would you be interested? And at that time, I had no idea what this firm was, or, I wasn't coming from the financial sector. So I just wasn't, familiar with it. But I did my research and I thought, oh, okay, they do a lot of things in this firm. And I think it'd be a great opportunity to learn and grow in such a massive, massive organization. And then I ended up there for 6 years. So, I held 3 different roles within those 6 years. So I started out in Atlanta in the Southeast region, and I was working on proposals and marketing material for some of the large deals that were coming out of the Southeast region for us. Then an opportunity came up in Australia, and I decided to sort of go for it. And it was also a bit of a promotion for me, and I was offered the role. So I actually moved with the firm here to Sydney, and that's sort of how I ended up here in Sydney. So, it's been a wonderful journey. I can't say that, it was awful and that I didn't have a lot of support. I had a wonderful team of people who really supported me and championed me and helped me to be promoted. And then once I got to Sydney, again, I sort of knew deep down inside that this wasn't what I wanted to keep doing. But, life happens, and you go from one milestone to the next. And, I think I was doing quite well. And so I got promoted again, and I got promoted to associate director, which was huge for me. Because here, you don't really see a lot of people of color in Australia in terms of the corporate space. And so it was just a very unique experience. And then I decided that, look, I probably need to make a change.
No, definitely. And what I love hearing about that is, and I hope, the listeners take note too, is you took a chance, right? You took a huge chance. I mean, it was a great industry that you were in, but going from the Southeast all the way to Australia, I think there's something to be said for you taking that leap. So I appreciate you sharing that. So what I'd like to do now is take you back a couple of years, right? So it's obviously, June in 2022, we're talking right now, but I want to take you back to March of 2020. And, at that time, I'm sure pretty much everybody remembers where they were, when things started kind of going south. Yeah. And the pandemic, as we now know it, really starts to take hold. So talk to us a little bit about how the pandemic started to affect you.
Oh, man. How did it not affect me? I think a lot
Right.
of people, right? We were just like whiplashed with that. It's funny that you mentioned March 2020 because that was our original wedding date. And we were due to be married, and my husband and I were due to be married in March of 2020. And funny story, we were due to get married in Jamaica. That's where we're both from. And we get ready, our whole wedding's been planned, etc. the week, actually the day before we were due to fly out, basically it felt like the world exploded in COVID. And and so I get on the flight because I'm determined, we're gonna make it through. And I get to DC where my family is, and literally the day after I get there, Australia closed its borders. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Australia was one of the most strict or most stringent countries when it came to borders, and actually just opened their borders late last year from COVID. And it was an absolute border closure, meaning they were citizens of Australia that were stuck abroad for the entire time and literally were just coming home. So we had a huge disruption to our lives. We had to cancel our wedding. I was stuck in DC for a bit. I couldn't get back to Australia. My husband was still in Australia. And anyway, I finally ended up getting an exemption to travel back to Australia. And then we kind of just hunkered down here. But from a career perspective, look, I think COVID was one of those things that helped to really clear the noise. And it really helped me to understand what was most important to me in my life. And certainly, around family and relationships and, obviously us having to sort of replan our personal life, it really just communicated to me that, look, life is short. There are people dying of COVID. There's just all of these really horrific things happening, right? Which was just a huge wake-up call for me that said, look, there's no use in continuing to go down a path where you're not happy and it's not your definition of success. It might be someone else's, but it's not yours. And life is short. And so for me, I really started to kind of connect with my inner sort of self around what is it that you always wanted to do. You need to get back to that. I think you took a bit of a detour and it's not too late. So that's sort of my, COVID story, which I think is similar to a lot of people. I think a lot of people came to a reckoning. Yeah.
No, agreed. And, as the show is going to be launching later on, this month, and you'll see as it goes forward, a lot of themes of what you just mentioned are present throughout some of my guest conversations.
Yeah.
And so it's a perfect segue into, so what did you learn during this time?
Good question. Oh my goodness. I feel like there were so many lessons during that time. For me, as I said, I think it was, number one, life is short. Number two, there are no guarantees. You can plan, you can, do your absolute best to sort of create a life or a world that you want. But ultimately, there are a lot of things that are out of your control. And I think that was a huge lesson of COVID. And there's a saying, man plans and God laughs. And I think that that's very true. And I think COVID was really evident of that, right? So that was a big lesson for me, was to just kind of let go a little bit. I'm a bit of a hyper planner where I need a 5-year plan. I need to know where I'm going in 5 years, and so that I can start working and getting there. And so, COVID just threw that out the window. It was like, no. Like, you can't leave your house. Like, what are you planning? Like, what are you doing?
Right. Don't plan for anything.
Right. So that was a big lesson. And then the other big lesson for me was, look, take chances. I don't think I was ever afraid of taking chances before, but I think I always took very safe and calculated, sort of minimal risk chances. And I saw COVID as a time, I saw people really stepping out of their comfort zones. I saw people really kind of fighting and struggling with, their work-life balance and making difficult decisions for themselves and for their families. And I was like, you know what? Now's the time. If you're going to do something that's going to cause disruption in your life, everything else around you is being disrupted right now. You might as well, you know what I'm saying? Get in that sort of lane and, have the courage to make the changes in your life that you no longer want to live with, So that was, I think those were some of the bigger lessons for me.
Awesome. No, that's great. And especially with people working remotely too. And now it's like, well, hey, working remote, I might as well try to start X, right? And so no,
Mm,
that reigns true. So now when you think
yeah.
about now the work you were doing, how did the pandemic start to affect your relationship with your job?
Yeah, so I was, I wasn't a stranger to working long hours. I think when you're in a big four and sort of, if you're sort of in leadership as well, there's sort of this silent expectation that you are available whenever there's something that absolutely needs to be done, right? Which essentially translates to you're available. so,
Yeah.
so I found that when COVID happened, that became even more of a norm where you were sort of expected to really flex, be flexible and just try your best to, work well with the conditions that we were all now in due to COVID. So I found myself kind of working more, which I think a lot of people will also relate to. But then I also found myself really being, I wouldn't say disillusioned, but I started to feel a great sense of dissatisfaction with the work that I was doing. And I'll explain that a little bit more, but I really started to feel like, what is it that you value in this work, right? Like, how does this align with the output that you want to produce in the world? How does this align with that? And I knew that, look, this is something that I can do. I think I'm fairly decent at doing it. I found that I was adding value to my team and adding value to, our organization. But I knew that it was just not the role that I wanted to play in the world. The Patrecia, the corporate person, or the person on partner track, or the person, that just wasn't the identity that I saw for myself, that vision. And I think that's so important, that you have a vision for yourself and you have a vision for your life, and that you don't, allow life circumstances to change that vision that you have for yourself. So I really started to question what I valued and what I was doing, and how much what I was doing was helping the people or the communities that I really wanted to be helping. Stuff that I was doing back when I had finished law school, those type of things that really, while they were grueling and difficult, they were really fulfilling, because I saw the people, I saw their faces, I saw the impact of those communities, right? So I think that was sort of a big changing point for me. Even though I knew I wanted to transition for a while, it was just one of those things where, and I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but you're doing well, right? And so people are thinking, you're doing well, you look happy, you're doing fine, you're getting promoted, everything is well, but inside you're unhappy and you're playing someone else's role.
That's a
Yeah.
great point.
Mm.
That's a really great point, because sometimes that outwardly, it looks like, oh, she's successful, she's doing this, she's doing that. But like you said, that your inner self is telling you, that I'm not fulfilled there. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Mm. Yeah.
So now you were in this role, in this prior role for about 6 years, you mentioned, right? And so now we come to, and keep me honest here, but we come to around August of 2021, you
Mm-hmm.
decide, it's time to go, right? And so you leave your job then. And so now, ultimately, why did you leave your job during the pandemic?
Well, my husband was like, "It's time for you to go." No, basically, I was not happy. I was very, jokes aside, but it was,
Yeah.
that's a part of it, right? I think your family and your loved ones start to see some changes. And for me, that was the case. From a mental health perspective, there were certainly some impacts there for me. Even physically, I started to feel physically like in my body. I started to have a lot of back problems and stuff because I'm like hunched over a computer at home. So I can't go into the office. I don't have a lot of other spaces to work. Everything just started to really point me in a certain direction, and it kind of just served as confirmation, like, hey, you're actually not well. You're not well enough, or you're not well to the standard that you could be emotionally, mentally, and even physically. I remember going to my chiro, And he was like, do you think you could take some time off, in his Aussie accent? And he's like, do you think you could get some time off? Because you really need to, take some time and rehab and, go for walks, go for swims, do things that, my back was pretty messed up. And I was like, do you know what? I think I'm going to take a long time off. And, at the time, he wasn't really aware of what I was talking about. But yeah, I think I really just started to notice some changes in myself. And I think this is really key for me. I'm used to pushing through and just being like, right, keep going, right? Get it done. You can do it. It's a phase. You'll be fine. You'll move on. But I think when I got to a stage where, I was waking up in the morning and I didn't feel like myself. I felt like just going through the motions, right? Like I was a hamster on a wheel. I even started to experience some symptoms of depression. And I think it's important to talk about this and normalize it, because I think people think like, oh, it's just a job. You're working, you're fine, you're doing well. And it's like, no. You have to know who you are and the things that impact you. And for me, I started to see these changes within myself. I started to get a bit more pessimistic, and I was just like, generally, and I'm an optimistic person and I like to see the best in things. And I just started to be really pessimistic, and I was like, nothing matters. And to the point where, my family, they were like, no, this is not you. I think at that point I was like, I need to make a change, and I need to figure out what I want to do, and I need to figure it out. And I can't do that while I'm on, 10 conference calls a day, or while I'm still feeling the pressure of living up to my own standards and expectations. Because as long as I'm in this role, I need to perform. In my mind, it's I need to do well and I need to finish well. And it's like, when you're like that, and you just need to stop, you need to hit the brakes, and then you need to reconnect with yourself. So I did. And I said, I had a chat with my family and just said, look, I think this is what I need to do. And they were all very supportive. Yeah. But it was time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And I'm glad you had obviously the family support to make that move, but also the self-awareness to recognize in yourself that, look, things, I'm not the same. Right.
Yeah.
And so acknowledging that, I think is really important. And to your point about, us normalizing that, I think that's important too. And you'll notice that on the show as well. We've had a lot of good conversations with folks who are comfortable talking about that in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really hoping that, other folks become a bit more comfortable as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Now you've talked about how it's impacted you, right? So tell us a little bit about what has happened since you left.
Well, there was a bit of confusion the first week because I didn't know what I was supposed to do with myself. I was like, all right, I feel like I just need to rest. At the time I had a therapist, and because I think it's also important to talk about that, and how, especially in community of people of color, it's still taboo to say, oh, I'm making a major life decision. And in fact, a lot of people in our community still don't even have access to those resources, when they really actually need to be talking through things with a professional. So I'm really grateful and blessed that I had the opportunity to do that. And I said, look, I'm going to leverage this. And I spoke to a therapist, and she sort of helped me through that period of time in my life, which was very, very difficult emotionally, psychologically. You start to think about your identity. Who am I if I'm not this person who has this job, who is able to do X, Y, Z, right? To the point where your career becomes synonymous with your identity. And I think there was a part of me that was struggling with that, because I thought, if I leave, then who will I be? I need to be able to reconstruct myself and figure out who I was before, I kind of came down this path. So I think during that time frame, I was really intentional about, number one, resting, sleeping, just being like, you need to sleep, and just
the basics.
The basics, right? Like, just let your body recover. And then also doing things that make you feel healthy and well. So whether that's reading, whether that's going for daily walks, whether that's making your favorite foods or your favorite meals at home, picking up the phone and calling my friends and my family and just being like, how have you been? Like, it's been a minute. Like, just reconnecting to the things that matter to you. That was one of my, huge goals. And I was really intentional about doing that. So I think that was number one for my wellness. The other bit was I really wanted to sit down and sort of map out who Patrecia was and why, so that there would be no regrets, right? Because sometimes we make decisions and then we look back, and if we're in the moment and if things don't really look right for some, period of time, you start to doubt yourself. You start to second guess, like, I left a really good job, or I left, a high salary. I left, whatever it was that you appreciated about that role. And you start to forget what it was like. And so I wanted to make sure that I was clear on why I left and making sure that I understood the purpose for this season. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of inner work, a lot of journaling, a lot of deep thinking, a lot of challenging myself. What is it that you value about, a particular role or career? How have you allowed that to shape you? And how do you sort of turn back that time in terms of the progress? So how do you get back to a space where you are uniquely you, whether you have XYZ job or you have another job, right? I think I had to come to the understanding that jobs come and go, but who you are is forever. Your character and your identity is forever. You will have many jobs, but you have to know who you are in every job that you get into. So I wanted to make sure that I put in the work so that whether I'm in another job or whatever job there is after that, I don't allow any of those roles to shape me as a person in terms of my identity. I bring my identity to my work. My work doesn't create my identity. And I think there needed to be a bit of a flip in that for me. So yeah, I think there was just a lot of deep work that needed to be done. And then I started, later on, started to think about, all right, so here's what I'd like to do. How do I get there?
Got it. And so now, and I love how you mentioned being really intentional about it, and I hear it through your words now, right? And so, what have you learned more about yourself throughout this process?
Yeah, I learned that doing meaningful work or work that aligns with my sense of purpose and the things that I value, I have learned that that is critical to my mental health and well-being. And it might sound quite straightforward for some people, but again, I come from a background where work is work. You kind of make the best of everything that you have. You don't go chasing or seeking for things that may not present themselves before you. You just hunker down, you do your best, and you work with what you have. So from that mentality, and that's, coming from a strong Jamaican father and, that sort of work ethic that you have, it sounded a bit foreign to me to say what I do as a job is critical to my mental health. Like it just sounded like real woo-woo to me. You know what I mean? And so I had to normalize that and be like, actually, yeah, because I saw myself, I saw who I was becoming when I was when I was spending a certain portion of my life doing work that I didn't find any sense of fulfillment or purpose in it. I knew that I wanted to impact issues in the world, issues that were people-focused issues. I didn't want to impact systems or processes or bottom lines or revenue targets, which is what I had been doing. And that was a very, very huge realization for me. And I said, okay, now that you accept that you are the type of person, you need to do work that aligns with your values, because that is going to create a sense of wellness and purpose for you. And without that, you're not going to feel you're not going to feel fulfilled or purposeful in your life. So that for me, I said, okay, I know that that's me now. And it's funny because it's like, you know, these things growing up about yourself, but in life you tend to forget things sometimes, right? So again, it was reconnecting to that, and then saying work isn't everything. That was the other huge realization, that you were put on this earth to do more than just have a job and work. And some people are lucky enough to have what they do play that role in their lives, where that's a huge part of how they contribute back to the world from a sort of a purposeful perspective. But the vast majority, and data and statistics show this, right? The vast majority of people in this world are not doing jobs that they feel are in alignment. They're working because they have to care for their family, they have to care for themselves. And so I think that was, one of the things where I said, hey, life is about more than just your job. And your job is a means to carry out whatever you feel your purpose is on the earth. It is not your purpose. Your purpose is not to crunch numbers. Your purpose is not to, right? So you have sort of a deeper, innate, divine purpose, and your job is a method, is a means of you doing that, but it isn't your purpose. And there's a difference, right? So that was the other major realization for me.
I think that was beautifully said. And, so earlier I had mentioned that, you kind of run these two companies now. And so tell us a little bit more about Women of Color at Work, as well as Salt and Light Wellbeing.
Yeah, so I've always loved mentoring and coaching. And while I was in my previous role, and even before then, I always found it to be really important to work with young women in particular, especially young Black women, young Black girls, and just to help them, experience or go through things that I went through, to be that sort of support system for them. So I've carried that sort of that desire and that value with me throughout my career. And so I did a lot of career coaching. I had mentors. I was a diversity mentor, and had a lot of really great sort of managers and supervising associates and junior managers that I was able to coach and mentor through their career, and just navigating the vastness of, a large company and who they were, and, as minorities within this sort of culture. And then certainly in Australia, again, there's quite a big difference in terms of the diversity that you see here. You just don't see a lot of people of color, particularly people of African descent, Caribbean descent, Black people who are in these corporate spaces. So out of that, I really felt a purpose and a calling to continue doing that. So I thought, how can I continue to do this? So for me, that was through coaching. So that's where Women of Color at Work came up, and I really wanted to continue to be that sort of support, really, and advocate for women of color at work. There were some issues that I just think, and the reason why it's Women of Color at Work is very specific, because I think being a woman of color in the workplace is a very unique experience. And I often share, like, how often do you go into a room and no one looks you in the eye, right? Or, you're presenting something and no one seems to ever pay attention or look at what pay attention to what you're saying. I've been in meetings and I was the only sort of Black woman or female in that room. And what does that mean when everyone's talking to themselves except for you, right? There's all of these different nuances and experiences that I really wanted to tackle, not just from a coaching perspective, but from an advocacy perspective. So that's where Women of Color at Work came up. And then my other sort of coaching area would be in wellness. And for me, I really saw a bit of an opportunity or a gap in the wellness space when it came to Christian women. So women who espouse a certain faith and belief. What does that look like, right? I think the wellness space has a lot of different spiritual aspects to it, but I think Christian women often kind of suffer from some, mental health and emotional and physical issues, but there's not really a lot of space for that. So that's where Salt and Light came through there's a big correlation for me as well. I like to say that I do holistic career coaching. So, I'm not going to tell you that you need to climb the ladder and you need to be the best. I really like to get to the heart of who you are, and why you're doing the things you're doing and how you can achieve your goals for your own career, your own definition of success, not what other people tell you should be, right? So, yeah, so that was, a couple of things that I really wanted to launch, and I'm really grateful that I've had the time to do that and to work on that.
No, very nice. And, so now a part of this show, what I like to have our guests share is really some advice for others, right? So when you think about some of our listeners who may have a similar experience to yours, but really don't know what to do next, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, well, look, I think if you are still, in your job, I would definitely say really assess what is important to you in your life. And sometimes it takes different resources for you to really understand that, even if it's a therapist, or there's a lot of free resources out there. There's a really good podcast that I listen to around career change and transition, and it's called Happen to Your Career. I kind of really dug into a lot of the material there, and I think this podcast as well, Why I Left, is going to be another great resource for people who are currently in that space of like, look, I'm not happy, I'm drained, I'm burned out, I need to make a change, but I don't know how. So I think the first step in doing that is figure out what's important to you, and then, write that down, find some way to have that be physically sort of tangible before you. And then the next thing is to really look at what your options are and leverage the support that you have around you. Don't be afraid to take risks, because risks are so important and it's an essential part of growth. There's a saying that I love that says, growth is rarely found in your comfort zone. And I think that that's so, so true. We grow the most when we are being stretched and when we are being called to another level of ourselves. And so I think when you're afraid, if you're someone right now who's like, I'm here, but I'm afraid, I need this job, I need this income, I don't have the support, I would say think about the benefits of what you're going to receive when you do what's right for you. Think about that. Focus your mind on that instead of the fear. It's not going to be easy. I cannot say that, right? Like, from a very realistic perspective, everyone's situation is different, but everyone has the ability to be courageous and to take a risk. And I think, it doesn't even have to be, what you would call significant risks, right? It could be just, approaching your boss or your manager and saying, hey, I'd like to talk about another position, or, are there any other opportunities that are available for me here? Sometimes it doesn't involve completely leaving your company. Maybe there's something else there that you might want to do. But if for example, like me, that you actually want to make a complete career transition, you want to press the brakes on where you are and do something else that is going to fulfill your purpose or your calling, that requires courage. And you can't do that while you are being paralyzed by fear. So I would just say, feel the fear and then defy it. Make sure that you let yourself know that that fear is temporary. But if you don't make the change, what will you be giving up, right? What will you be sacrificing if you stay? And I think that is what should scare most people the most, is the possibility of missing out on a life that is more fulfilling and more meaningful, and a life where you can truly make an impact.
No, I love that. And now turning to some of the employer side now. So what advice would you give employers to really better support their employees during this time?
Yeah, look, I think listening to your employees is number one. I came from a company where I think they did a fairly decent job of that. There were a lot of surveys and a lot of different sort of feedback mechanisms that were used that I thought really helped to make the culture feel inclusive when it comes to sharing what works and what doesn't work from an employee's perspective. So I think every employer should invest resources and time into truly understanding what is important to their employees, whether that's flexibility, whether that's better pay, whether that's more opportunity for career progression, whether it's more, availability of being able to switch in and out of different roles or different positions. Whatever that is, I think companies need to be aware of that because it is a blind spot if you aren't. I think we're in a time in our culture and in our history where people, particularly from the millennial generation onwards, people are no longer willing to just suffer through life just to get a paycheck. It's just like that's not what's gonna work anymore.
No, not anymore.
not anymore. I think in our parents' generation, they were like, we're going to work for 15, 20, 30 years in the same place and we're just going to push through and make it work. But I think companies really need to know that that culture has changed and they need to be able to grow with that culture and that change. The other thing is specifically, and I'm going to speak around minorities because I'm a minority and I feel like I need to advocate for minorities as well, is there has to be a culture of inclusivity, not just on paper, but in practice. So, around the George Floyd protests and, the Black Lives Matter movement, we saw a lot of employers, right, sort of putting out media and messaging around what they were willing to do. That doesn't end just because people aren't protesting in the streets. You need to also be in tune with your employees, particularly those employees who come from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, so that they also feel included in the decisions that are being made on their behalf within the company. So I think there really just needs to be a lot more listening and a lot more paying attention to what people are saying, because a lot of people are just tired and burned out and they will move on. So,
yeah.
No,
absolutely. And, I came across an article, this was probably last week, so we were talking a little bit about millennials, but some of the Gen Zers, they're really more radical in that they're saying, look, sure, I'm putting life first and work needs to find a way to fit into that. And if it doesn't, forget it, and I commend them. I commend them for that.
That's right. And I think, look, Gen Z, they're absolutely the definition of that. And I think that started with millennials. I really do. I think that whole, value-based sort of purposeful work, I think that started with millennials, and then Gen Z, they came along and they were like, no, that's not even negotiable for us. Right. That's,
right.
That's not even going to be, so I think that, absolutely agree with you for sure.
Yeah. No, for sure. So all the Gen Zers who may be listening, you could say, from us millennials, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Okay.
You're welcome.
Yes. Well, Patrecia, this was a really, really great discussion. I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking some time to, speak with me. And look, I know that our difference is a lot over there. So I really, really enjoyed you coming on to the show and hearing your story.
Absolutely.
Yeah, would love for you to share where our listeners can support you.
Yeah, sure. Look, if you are interested in women of color at work, if you are a woman of color at work and you're looking for some coaching and support, my Instagram handle is Women of Color at Work, and you can email me at patreciaming@gmail.com. Similarly, if you are a Christian woman as well, and you're just looking to really figure out yourself from a wellness perspective and certainly if that also coincides with some of your career aspirations, that's, you can absolutely find me at Salt Light Wellbeing, and also at the same email, which is patreciaming@gmail.com. But yeah, otherwise there'll be a website coming soon. Yeah, and I'm also on LinkedIn as well if you'd like to connect with me there.
Awesome. Very well. All right. Well, look, that'll do it for today's episode. Again, I want to thank my guest, Patrecia Ming Buckley, for joining us today. I'll be sure to share the information where you can find her in our show notes. So I hope you all have a great week. Patrecia, thank you again for joining.
Thanks so
and
much,
we'll see
Brian.
you all. All right. We'll see you next time. The Great Resignation, people leaving their jobs in droves. There's a lot of buzz happening in the job market of late. Now, did you or someone you know leave your job during the pandemic and want to share your story? We've been having some really good conversations in this space, so if you're interested, I'd love to have you join the program. If so, here's how you can do it. First, you can email us at hello@whyleft.co. That's hello@whyleft.co. Or visit us online at whyleft.co. That's whyleft.co. Look forward to having you join the conversation. Thanks again for listening to Why I Left. Be sure to join us next time for more stories from the Great Resignation. Visit us at www.whyleft.co. That's whyleft.co. And subscribe to the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.